मेरे पांव सूखे खेत की दरार जैसे फटे नहीं है, और मेरा चेहरा धूप से झुलस कर काला नहीं हुआ है, अभी भी तो काला नहीं हुआ है। मैं ये सब क्यों जानूं? और फिर मुझे क्या जरूरत है ये जानने की कि किसान आंदोलन क्या है और क्यों है।
When the tomatoes are thrown on the streets, nobody in the cities is worried. पर लेकिन टमाटर का 10 रुपए भाव हो जाए, 15 रुपए हो जाए, everybody is up in arms कि मेरा हाउस का बजट खराब हो गया है, and so on and so forth. This contempt against farming, I think, has to go.
स्वामीनाथन की और कोर्ट थी, उसके बाद नए पैरामीटर बहुत चेंज हो गए। दूसरा क्वेश्चन ये है, और तीसरा, जिस तेजी से कारपोरेट प्लस राइटिज्म उनके यूनिट के कारण लैंड से बहुत पीजेंट्री को निकाला जा रहा है। थर्ड चैलेंज यह है।
I've been watching the farmer movement for 60-70 years. The cooperative movement originated when I became a lawyer, and it has failed the farmer miserably.
ये बात मेरी एनी ही नहीं, ना मसला सिर्फ किसान का है, ये पिंड दे वास्ते रहन दा है, जिन लोग दा दूजे जान दा है।
First of all, I congratulate our special guest today, Namita Waikar, and I congratulate her on her deeply researched book, Farmers Protest, A Movement of Our Times, and not just researched, it is written with passion and feeling. My thanks to the Press Club team for organizing this event with our dear Professor Swaraj Bir, editor, writer and many things else, for chairing this event which celebrates the right to protest. It is the kindness of the Press Club to have an old woman like me who forgets more than she remembers, to speak on the farmers' protest, which brought a shift in times when the voices of the country were being muffled, and those were threatening times, all set to usher in totalitarianism and many mouths being silenced. A fierce psychosis was created on social media. If anyone spoke, and the people were locked in their rooms. What happened was just the opposite of as the brave farmers of Punjab and Haryana reached the Shambhu border on the road to Delhi. Men, women, many with children in their laps, dared to protest, singing the revolutionary songs of our famous people's poet, Sant Ram Udasi. Desh hai pyara, sanu zindagi pyari nalu, desh to pyare de do khaniyan. असा तोड़ देनी जो डर वाली जो कहानियां. And I was by and large considered a soft person in journalism, writing more on arts and culture. So wonderful reporting was being done by my colleagues, my younger colleagues, and I called the editor and I said, can you do me a favor? I may not live long enough to see another movement like this, so please send me to the Shambhu border. He was kind enough to allow me to go, stay there and write about it. And the spirit of the movement was unbelievable. Men, women, some with children, a woman driving a tractor from Ludhiana with her female friends and reaching the Shambhu border. And it was a very spontaneous protest, and with a lot of energy in it. And what was sad was that it was linked somehow with the Khalistani factor. If anything happens in Punjab, it's Khalistan that comes first. But it was a very difficult movement, but yet that resistance paid, and many lost their lives. Many were injured, many died, but not then. Again in 2024, a second attempt was made at protesting against this, and finally the government had to withdraw the draconian laws, and it was certainly a great victory of the people. And the North, Punjab, Haryana, they've always been known for, because these are the agricultural areas of the country, and have been known to resist, whether it was partition. We had Sir Chotu Ram from Haryana. Punjab, of course, has always made a big contribution in many things. And saying this much, I remember something else also, that after winning the election, our film star from Bollywood, Kangana Ranaut, came here, and there was the guard at the airport, policewoman, whose mother had been very actively participating in the protest. So she gave her a tight slap, and her answer for that reason for doing so was that she said that ज़नानियां नूं 100 रुपया देंदे ने जो आके बैठ के protest करदियां. And it became a big thing. A security guard, a police, slapping actor very close to the powers that be. But what was very interesting, and which defines the Punjabi spirit, that overnight there was a singer who had written a song. Jatiya Punjab diye anantarwadi, kisana बारे बोलदी सी चुप करा दी, दिल्ली तक पहुंच गई आवाज मित्रों, फिर सारा चंडीगढ़ थाना भजदा, लोकां नूं ते मिलदे ने हार मित्रों, ऐ सुनिया है जित के लफेड़ा बजे. So this has been the relentless spirit of protest, and we are proud of it, and I hope this resistance will remain. Thank you.
I would like to invite Namita, Savrajbir sir and Nirupama to launch the book. Namita Waikar is a novelist, entrepreneur, and journalist based in Pune. She is also the managing editor and co-founder of the People's Archive of Rural India, or PARI. In her debut novel, The Long March, Waikar tells the story of an urban elite being forced to pay heed to the plight of the Indian farmers by a long march of rural farmers into the cities of the country. Namita Waikar leads and writes for the Grindmill Songs project, published on PARI, People's Archive of Rural India, a collection of over 1 lakh couplets sung by rural women from Maharashtra. She is the author of The Farmers' Protest, a movement of our times, published by Yoda Press and Melbourne University Press. and that she will be in talk with Savrajbir Singh. He's an Indian Punjabi playwright, poet, administrator, and editor. He has been the editor of Punjabi Tribune. And this is also very important because he was the editor of Punjabi Tribune when this farmers' protest was going on, and we all know what kind of role he played in strengthening that movement. He has written over 15 plays and published essays and poems. He's also a nominated member of Punjabi University Senate. He served as a medical doctor in a rural government agency in Gurdaspur district during 83-84. He entered civil services in India, defense accounts in 1984, joined the Indian Police Service in 1986, and worked in Assam, Meghalaya, Kedah, and retired as DGP Meghalaya, Shillong in July 2018, and after that he became the editor of Punjabi Tribune. So over to you.
I again welcome Srimati Namita Waikar to the land of the five rivers, the land of Baba Sheikh Farid and Guru Nanak, the land of the people resistance movements. You know, Namita ji is a novelist, a journalist, a biochemist, and a social activist. You know her association with Pari. And before this book, Namita ji had written a novel, The Long March. About that, he also about farmers, their struggle, their hard work, their great determination, and their vibrant lives, but those lives were suicide also. In fact, that book starts from a farmer suicide. She traces a long trajectory in that novel, from suicide to resistance. And very interestingly, before any long march of farmers in the recent history of India, before the march in Maharashtra in 2018 and the march from Punjab and also from Haryana in 2020 had occurred, she imagined a kind of literary situation in the novel where the farmers from all over the state converge and they voice their demand, and there Vikram Sonare, the son of the farmer who had committed suicide, and his comrades Malika, Trevor, and others defying the power of the state. Thus, the fiction and imagination of an activist had anticipated and imagined the moments in farmer struggle which happened at Singhu and Tikri borders and which we cherish. Now, coming to this book, farmer protest is about the heroic struggle of the farmers in year 2020-21 against the three farm laws which were enacted, which threatened to tear the fabric of the peasants' livelihoods and agrarian economy. We in Punjab particularly treasure this struggle as it started from Punjab. The idea originated here, and the momentum built up, and the farmers of Punjab and Haryana led from the front, becoming the vanguard. For us, the Punjabis, it was the time of rediscovery of Punjab's true spirit, which had waged endless fights against repression and tell me. It was the moment of rediscovery of the great heritage of brotherhood and sisterhood, Sanjivarta, during the time of strife, as bestowed upon us by Sikh Gurus, Sufi saints, and the saints of the movement. Moreover, in that struggle, now we come to the discussion on the book. But before I ask Namita ji any question, I would request her to read us the poem by Malayali poet Rafiq Ahmed as it appears in the book. I will request her to read it both in Hindi and English.
Thank you, Nirupama and Mr. Rajneesh, and thank you all of you for coming here today, and very happy to be here. So I know that they say that all over the world, the Russians are most affected by poetry. And I think if I carry that analogy to India, I would say that Punjabis are the ones who are most affected and impacted by poetry. So I think it's very apt to start this in the poem. I came upon this poem very accidentally. I mean, there was a post from the Nation for Farmers group where the Hindi poem was given. The Malayalam original by Rafiq Ahmed was translated by trade union leaders, A.R. Sindhu and A.T. Padmanabhan. तो हिंदी में मैं पहले पढ़ूंगी, उसके बाद अंग्रेजी में. कविता का शीर्षक नहीं है, लेकिन it's very impactful for the book itself. मैं नहीं जानता कैसे पकता है गेहूं और धान कैसे आता है. मैं नहीं जानता कैसे पकता है गेहूं और धान कैसे उगता है. मुझे नहीं पता प्याज और आलू दुकान में कैसे पहुंचते हैं. तूफानों से फसल कैसे बर्बाद होती है, ये भी मुझे नहीं मालूम. पानी में डूबने से फसल नष्ट होती है और कीड़े फसलों को सफाचट कैसे करते हैं, ये मैं नहीं जानता. झुलसा, मोज़ेक, खैर आदि कौन सी बीमारी है. कर्ज की जंजाल, फिर कीटनाशक की मजबूरी क्या है, मुझे नहीं मालूम. मेरे पांव सूखे खेत की दरार जैसे फटे नहीं है और मेरा चेहरा धूप से झुलस कर काला नहीं हुआ है. अभी भी तो काला नहीं हुआ है. मैं ये सब क्यों जानूं और फिर मुझे क्या जरूरत है ये जानने की कि किसान आंदोलन क्या है और क्यों है. So I felt compelled to translate this poem into English and use that as the start of the book. I don't know how wheat ripens and how paddy grows. I don't know how onion and potato reach the shops. How are harvests ruined by storms? I don't know that either. How are crops destroyed when they drown in floods? And pests flatten harvests. How? I don't even know this. Blight, mosaic, iron rust, what are these diseases? What distress from death brings on a desperate resort to pesticide? I don't know. My feet have not cracked like the parched earth of fields. My face has not yet darkened walking in the sweltering sun. So why should I know all this? And then, why do I need to know? What is Kisan Andolan and why farmers protest?
Very sensitive point. And as we know, we had a number of points during this peasant struggle, right from Sandeep Pathak to every poet who was writing in Punjabi language. But now we come to the book, and my first question is a traditional one to Madam, that how she came to write about the book, how the idea originated and progressed.
Okay. So, actually, you spoke about the novel which I had written earlier, and which was published in 2018. So, that was my first, I would say, interaction with a farming family. And while researching for that book, I got in touch with some journalists and experts who were working with farmers and who were writing about farmers. And one of them was J.D. Hadikar, and another was, of course, P. Sainath, who has extensively worked on the farmers' distress and suicides. So, interacting with them, over the years, this is, I think, from 2009 onwards, I got involved in the formation of PARI, which finally was launched in 2014. And while in PARI, while I managed, the organization and running of the organization, I also wanted to be involved in the writing and reporting, which I tried to do to some extent. And it was during the first, it was the March 2018 protest of farmers from Nasik to Mumbai, which PARI covered and extensively, and probably we were the first media organization to cover it. Then in 2018 November, which was just after my novel was published, there was another farmers' protest, Kisan Mukti Morcha, which happened in Delhi. And PARI was again involved, and I also went with the PARI team to Delhi, and we met many protesting farmers. I also reported on them. And it was during this time that an organization called Nation for Farmers was set up. Not an organization formally, but a collective of like-minded people, most of them non-farmers, but who wanted to do something, work towards doing something for farmers. And I was an ordinary member of that Nation for Farmers. And so when the 2020 protests happened, and we were again covering them on PARI, and although there was COVID and pandemic, there were journalists who were interested in covering it. And it was during that time that the publisher approached me, which is Yoda Press and Melbourne University Press, and they were doing a series on South Asia. And it was actually the reading of my novel which prompted the publisher to commission this book. And with my interest in farmers and reporting for them for PARI, I took it upon myself as a challenge, because the premise of the book was to write about farmers for those who live in cities and who are completely cut off from their rural roots, who almost have no interest in why the farmers were protesting, and who also complain that कुछ भी होता है तो farmers आ जाते हैं, क्या जरूरत है, और traffic jam होता है, those kind of insensitive complaints. And one heard those things in the cities very often. So I felt that the book needed to be something which an ordinary citizen could read. And there were many such citizens who were genuinely interested, but they didn't know what to refer to. because farmers' protests had become so politicized that people would be either on the left side or the right side, and they wouldn't actually be looking at what the farmers actually wanted, and the interest of the farmers was getting lost in the way. So I felt that a book that would explain this was very much the need, and that is how I came to write about this book.
The book has a kind of a very wide range, right from the history of the farmer movements to the 2020-21 farmer agitation. And as we all know, she had spoken about her association with Bari. And when this movement started, some of us were asked by the leaders of the farmer organizations to organize a seminar and a gathering of intellectuals and at Chandigarh, and Professor Ishwari there, with his help and with the help of Rajinder Singh Jima, Sudev Singh Sassa, and many other organizations, we organized a seminar, and where Mr. P. Sainath and Devinder Sharma ji were the main speakers, and then a number of other seminars and things was started and all that. As I said, there is a large number of themes in this book which run parallel and come to 2020. A chapter in this book which is of particular interest to us, to the Punjabis, to Punjab, is about Green Revolution. And she raises many questions in it. Did we really need it? The issue of food security, the hunger in 1950s and early 1960s, the disgraceful import under PL authority, and the successes and achievements and the failure of Green Revolution, the inequality it brought. I would request her to give her perspective about Green Revolution.
So, I think two of the most challenging chapters in the book for me were the Green Revolution, the chapter on that, and the other one was the challenges of agriculture. So, I think it was in the 1960s, and particularly after the two wars in 62 and 65, that the Green Revolution became instrumental in increasing the agricultural output to make us self-sufficient in food. Now, the impact of the Green Revolution was felt in many ways. One was we moved from in the states where this was practiced, we moved from a family-based farming to a capitalist form of agriculture, where the government incentivized the use of high-yield varieties, and chemical inputs were supplied by corporates through government subsidies. What happened was it made the prosperous farmers richer, as they were the first ones to benefit. And the mechanization also increased, and small and marginal farmers and landless farmers who leased lands from the big farmers, some of them also lost the opportunity to lease and do farming. And the inequality between the haves and the have-nots, it widened further. And the more important impact was the impact on the soil and water. The healthy farming principles of multi-cropping was replaced with monocropping, which made crops more vulnerable to pests. Water levels also went down in the water tables, and Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who is called the father of the Green Revolution in India, he gave an alert, a warning during one of the conferences that we need to pay heed to overuse of chemical inputs. But that was largely ignored. And it is government agencies that should have monitored and regulated, but they did not. And if you will permit me, I would like to read a small passage, which was what Dr. Swaminathan read out at this conference. So this, on 4th January 1968, Dr. Swaminathan made the following statement in the presidential address to the Agricultural Sciences section of the Indian Science Congress, which was held at Varanasi. And what he said was, intensive cultivation of land without conservation of soil fertility and soil structure would lead ultimately to the springing up of deserts. Irrigation without arrangements for drainage would result in soils getting alkaline or saline. Indiscriminate use of pesticides, fungicides and herbicides could cause adverse changes in biological balance, as well as lead to an increase in the incidence of cancer and other diseases through the toxic residues present in the grains or other edible parts. Unscientific tapping of underground water would lead to the rapid exhaustion of this wonderful capital resource left to us through ages of natural farming. The rapid replacement of numerous locally adapted varieties with one or two high-yielding strains in large contiguous areas would result in the spread of serious diseases capable of wiping out entire crops, as happened during the Irish potato famine of 1845. Therefore, the initiation of exploitative agriculture without a proper understanding of the various consequences of every one of the changes introduced into traditional agriculture, and without first building up a proper scientific and training base to sustain it, may only lead us into an era of agricultural disaster in the long run, rather than to an era of agricultural prosperity. So, as we had warned, we did go into prosperity for some time, but eventually we did go into the disaster-related impact.
We know that the warning of Mr. Swaminathan, and we also know that our own Professor S.S. Joel, the Joel Committee report, I think it's 1985, in which he outlined the similar concerns and all that.
Right.
And he also had an experience, and there is some linkages that how militancy worked in Punjab and Green Revolution had some part, not entirely, but some part to play in it. And that is this thing. But now the situation is staring at our face. We know that we are using the high-yielding varieties, pesticide, insecticides, we are depleting the groundwater. So would you like to say something, what is the way forward, what to do?
I'm not an expert to talk about solutions, because that is something that the policymakers have to do. In fact, one Dr. Satwinder Singh, I met her at a conference in Mysore, the farmers conference, and she also mentioned, she is a scientist from Punjab, an agricultural scientist, and this is what she said, that the scientists can provide different ideas of solutions, but the implementation finally is on the policymakers, the bureaucrats, and the government politicians, and they need to come up with solutions. But one farmer in Sangrur district, his name was Jujar Singh, he said to me that, look, I know that I am putting poison in my soil and in my water, and it goes into the grains and it goes into my stomach. But this is what the government had told us. This was the incentive and we followed this path. Now, if the government tells us that you use a different method, if we have to do farming without chemical inputs, we will require government support, because switching to organic farming is not an easy thing. It takes at least 3 years to switch over, and during those 3 years, your earnings will go down to maybe 50% or less. And there are farmers who have switched over, but they are mostly large area holders, and they are able to experiment in smaller land holdings and then slowly, gradually move to bigger lands. That is something which will have to be really worked out.
Then I will come to the central point of this book, which is the focus of this book, and how the book is named The Farmer Protest of 2021. Its origin, role of farmers organization, role of the spontaneous search in the movement. I would like that you give a perspective and totality about this protest. How do you perceive it and how do you view it?
So, first of all, I think I would say that historically, farmers have always had to protest. They always had to fight for their rights or what they want. Nothing was given to them easily. So the history of farmers' protest, which is the first chapter, it talks about it largely, and these protests happened all over India, and right from I have listed them from 1800s, but even before that they happened. So, what happened was, and I think Nirupama ji also mentioned this when she spoke, that in the midst of the pandemic, the government passed the 3 farm ordinances in June 2020, and which were enacted into laws in September 2020. Now, this happened at a time when farmers were already under distress. They were reeling under the distress. And why were they in distress? Because of low procurement of their produce and rising costs, reduced earnings, and mounting debts. And also remember that from 2017 and 18, they had been asking for an MSP to be higher because it was insufficient, and the MSP to include the cost of labor and some margin for profit as recommended by the Swaminathan Commission. So when the new government came into power in 2014, they had promised to double farmers' income in their election campaign. Now, not only did the income did not double, but they also declared that it can't be done. It's not possible to double the income. So, on top of all this, the laws were rammed in the parliament, and the farmers had no choice but to resist, especially because of some of the clauses in the laws that went against the very democratic principles of right to justice and access to courts to seek justice. So, when these laws were passed, one was that the contract farming law would make it difficult for farmers to negotiate with big agribusiness companies, and they would lose out. There were instances of earlier contract farming where farmers experienced losing their produce because it was not picked up or they were not paid enough. Then the other law, which was also called the APMC Act, Anti-APMC Act rather, which would disband the government regulated markets and make it difficult for farmers to sell their produce and get the MSP. And the third one, which was amendment to the Essential Commodities Act, that would actually make it easier for traders to hold on to more produce and cause problems not just for farmers but also for consumers. And there was no way for redressal for the contract farming laws because it was decided that the redressal would have to be done by approaching civil servants at the district level and not the courts. Now this was something which was considered very, and not just considered, but it is anti-democratic, and I feel in that, for this very reason, the protest that the farmers did was not just for their livelihood, but also for the sake of democracy, and because of them, common people were able to realize that this is what the farmers are fighting for. They are not just fighting for themselves, but for all of us in India, for all the citizens, farmers as well as consumers of farm produce.
Yes. And in Punjab, especially, this became like a saying that ये जो संघर्ष है, ये हमारी own customers. This is a kind of existential thing also for the lives and the lands of this thing. They perceived it like it. In your book, you mention about the role of Sikh traditions in the movement, especially the tradition of langar and the spirit of egalitarianism of Sikhism, which permeates, which you say permeated the movement. Would you like to say something about it?
Yeah, I would like to. I think most of you here in Punjab are aware of the Sikh history, and I think it is something that not everyone in India is aware of to that level of detail. Many of them are often misled by what is called as the Khalistani movement, and they mix the two, they confuse the two. So the Sikh tradition of langar and generosity and how it arose, I have discussed that in the book, and I felt it was important because it really helped to a large extent. Not at the Singhu border and the Tikri border, not just the langar that were run by the Gurudwara volunteers from Delhi and around Delhi, but also the voluntary labor that was provided by different farmers from Punjab at the Tikri border.
And also from Haryana.
Also from Haryana. And there were also farmers from other communities. The spirit of seva was very much seen at the border, and I wrote a story on Pali about one lady who created a shop, a tailoring shop, and she provided free labor for stitching clothes, essentials for the farmers there. And seeing her work on a video on social media or a TV channel, another tailor, a young man from Ludhiana, he decided to join her. And the two of them, functioning like mother and son, they provided this service. And it was mainly the seva bhav that prompted her to do this. She was herself not a farmer or not from the farming community, but she felt that she had to do something for the farmers. So I think this is something which could be seen at the protest sites very much. There were volunteers from different parts of the cities who came there, not just from Delhi, but from Haryana, elsewhere. There was a young lady who was a medical professional. She provided free medical service. And there were many such examples of people providing seva, which was an extension of the Sikh tradition of Nagar.
Truly, because doctors, the people from many other professions, and artists and everybody, they combined together. Namita ji, in her book, she described this protest as a song played in the peaceful way. A song played in the peaceful way. Yes, it was a song of resistance. I would say Shinashta Pahanji. Our poet Sudeep Patel, he had described this protest as Mela, a fair of light celebration and a fair of resistance. And he had written a poem, a Mela. He writes, a Mela hai, मैं जिथों तक नजर जांदी ते जिथों तक नहीं जांदी ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕ ਤੇ ਸਰਲੋਕ ਤੇ ਤ੍ਰੈਲੋਕ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਮੇਲਾ ਐਂਡ ਹੀ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਰਤ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਬਿਰਖ ਪਾਣੀ ਪੌਣ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਹੰਸ ਸਾਡੇ ਹਾਸੇ ਹੰਝੂ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੌਣ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੌਣ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਐਂਡ ਹੀ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੁਰਖਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਰੰਗਲਾ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੈ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕ ਮਨ ਦਾ ਸਿਰਜਿਆ ਮਿਥਿਹਾਸ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੈ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਦਕ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਬਰ ਸਾਡੀ ਆਸ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੈ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਸੁਰ ਧੁਨ ਅਤੇ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੌਣ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨੇ We ask this question to everybody in there in the sphere of the resistance and the sphere of celebration of life, celebration of democracy, and the celebration of fight for one's rights. And further progressing on this book's themes, I would specifically ask you about your views about the participation of women in this protest.
So, women were largely present. Women were largely present at the protest sites, and so I know that during the Nasik to Mumbai march, there was a huge contingent of women who were protesting, and that happened even in the Kisan Mukti Morcha in Delhi in 2018. Because I had written stories about women from West Bengal, from Bihar, and from other different states, from Maharashtra, who were protesting. Similarly, I think when the protests happened in 2020, the women from Haryana and Punjab were largely were involved to a very great extent. I saw them at the protest sites. They were working there, singing songs, going to the protest meetings, prayer meetings, and also there was sort of exchange of labor where one set of people from a family would work on the farms in their villages, and another set of people would be at the protest site, and then they would, exchange after a few months. The people in the village would come to the protest site, and those at the protest site would go to the villages back to continue with the work. So the work of farming did not suffer even though they were protesting, which was really something remarkable. The other thing that I would say about the role of women was many of them learned to drive tractors, and they drove tractors. In fact, the cover of the book, I have a district leader from Haryana. Her name is Poonamji. She was driving a tractor to the protest site, and this photograph was part of a story on Pari, and I decided to use that as the cover for the book. And I think that gave them a sense of, I wouldn't say power, but a sense of belonging and a sense of sharing the power that was mostly only assigned to men. And they were able to share that. And I think to some extent there was also concern and fear, because when they went back to the villages after the protests were over, there was a fear, and it did happen that they were expected to go back to the original role of working in the house, taking care of the household, and the power that they felt earlier was now sort of taken away, and some of them suffered because of that. So that is a different aspect of this part. But I think other than women, I would also like to talk a little about the media and the new media initiatives that happened during the protest. One of them was, of course, trolley times that we are all aware of. Many other smaller initiatives started. People wrote books. There were paintings, there were songs, there were small booklets, pamphlets. And interestingly, I know of at least 2 people who are doing their PhD which is based on the media initiatives that happened during the farmers' protest of 2020. So that's a very interesting development and an addition to the history of that time.
There are many questions and many themes in the book. And an important theme in the book is about the farmers who have been rendered invisible by the whole process of the development. They are farmers, but nobody talks about them. Government schemes, plans, farmer movement themselves don't take much notice of them, ignore them, silence them, and make them invisible. These are women farmers, tenant farmers, landless farmers, Dalit and Adivasi farmers, agriculture labor. These are the kind of people she mentioned in that book. And it's very, very important. I request her to elaborate more on this individual farmers community.
So, the invisibilized farmers, the women farmers who are about 65 to 80% or maybe 85% of work done on farms is done by women. and yet we refer to them as women farmers, because when we say farmer, we assume that it is the man, and they have to be specifically referred to as women farmers. Only about 15% of women farmers have ownership of the land titles, and which means that any government scheme which goes to a farmer does not go to women, it goes only to the man. There are farm laborers, women farmers themselves who work on their own farms as well as on other farms. And during the years after the 1991 economic reforms, when farmers' distress, I think it started more in 1995 onwards, a lot of distressed farmers and workers, they left villages and went to the cities in search of work, which meant the burden of work in villages fell more on the women, and they were, as it is, working on farms, taking care of the household, of the people, of the elderly. They were responsible for fetching water. All over India, the task of fetching water falls upon women. Then there were Adivasi farmers who were losing their land because of changes in the forest acts. And most of them didn't have land titles because they've been cultivating on lands for centuries without having any ownership titles. Then the tenant farmers again were worse off because the landlords who own the farmlands are not willing to form any lease agreements on paper. It is बोली की होती है भाषा, बोली में लीज करते हैं, and so all the schemes that the government provides for farmers, they go only to those who own the land. So the tenant farmers again lose out on these schemes. And the Dalit farmers who are at the lowest rung of this farm hierarchy, they are the worst off because many of them are landless and they work as laborers on different farms. During my research for the book, I met some students at the Punjab University in Patiala, and some of them were children of Dalit farm laborers, and they said that farmland should be distributed, they should own some land, without which we are always dependent on the landowners for our work. Many of them said that we don't want to go into farming because we don't want to be dependent on this. In fact, all over India, the children of farmers, especially small and marginal farmers, are deciding not to go into farming. The number of farmers is going down, and that would ultimately be a difficult time for all of us who are dependent on farmers for our food.
And there are many important things in the book, like the effect of climate on agriculture and the effect of agricultural practices on climate, and also the question of the fertilizers is there, the question of our food structure, like the return of the millets is there. But seeing the time constraint and all that, I will limit it to two questions which we can't escape. One is the question of debt and the linkage of farmer suicide in this. And you have written about this. I would like to say something about that, how you perceive this whole issue of debt and the farmer suicide.
think when at the time of the Green Revolution, when farming was incentivized for some farmers, loans were provided, and when banks were nationalized during Indira Gandhi's times, there were rural branches of many banks, and loans were available to farmers from these branches. But over time in the 1990s, when economic reform started and the spending on agriculture was, public spending on agriculture went down. That is also the time when rural branches were closed. So nationalized banks had branches in the cities, but in the smaller towns or villages, they were rapidly closing, which meant that farmers were largely left to taking loans from private money lenders who charged exorbitant rates. And often these money lenders were also the suppliers of seeds and fertilizers, pesticides, all the chemical inputs, which meant that they were bound to them. They were also the people who would procure the grain from the farmers. So it was like the farmer was tied to the money lender for life. And it was very difficult for most farmers to repay these loans. And that is what led to many of them taking the route of suicide. I would also like to add just a small but a very important thing here, which is that the suicide is not an event that suddenly happens, but it's a development, and this is something which Sainath is also talking about, that it's a development that happens over many years, where the farmer has been feeling not just a loss of economic and social standing, but also of self-respect, not just within the society, but also for himself and herself. And that is what causes this distress and ultimately leads to suicide.
As we said, in the context of Shakespeare play, Hamlet, that it's not Hamlet who is sick. It is the state of Denmark who is sick. And as a farmer commits suicide, it's not the farmer who commits suicide. It's the suicide in a way of his family also, who had to live afterwards. And the suicide of him, it's also the suicide of some of our relatives, of which are connected with the villages and with our ethos, which die with the time of when the suicide takes place. As a kind of last question, I would ask that how you perceive the role of farmer organizations and the other organizations with like Asian farmers or the farmers mission or the Kisan Major Commission, what is their role, and the question of coming together, the question of unity of the farmer organization and farmers, and how always the establishment tries to fracture that unity. I would like to share your views on it.
Yeah, so one little fracture of unity that happened was when a separate group of farm leaders decided to fight. Yeah, so they decided to fight elections and they broke away from the Sanyukt Kisan Morcha, which was a formation of over 30 different farm organizations, maybe more than that. Now, when these different farm leaders of these organizations, when they came together, they were all from different spectrum of the different ends of the political spectrum. But their central interest was to fight for the farmers, and that kept them together. And from one of the articles which Dr. Ashok Dhavle wrote, from Ashok Dhavle of AIKS, he wrote, and which was also a part of his book, was that they had very vigorous fights and arguments, but ultimately they stayed together because it was for the cause of the farmers. So I think it was this similar intention which formed the Nation for Farmers, which is people from all walks of life, and they continue to have biannual or annual meetings and conferences which are attended by students, journalists, activists, and where people who scientists and academics who work on agriculture and farming, they participate, as well as farm leaders. Now, the Kisan Mazdoor Commission was initiated by a group of similar leaders from Nation for Farmers, which comprised of Sainath, Dr. P. Sainath, Dr. Dinesh Abrol, and a few others. And I think it was on 26th November in 2021 that they held their first press conference in Delhi. So their role again is to take a look at different aspects of improvements that need to be done, policy changes that need to be done, and look at the policies that are brought in by the Niti Aayog, because it's been many years now since the Swaminathan Commission report was filed. It was filed in 2006-07, and since then so many changes have happened. So there is a need for a review and revision of some of the aspects discussed there, and I think that is what the Kisan Mazdoor Commission is looking at. And they are taking a broader view and a more inclusive view of including different farming communities, including the invisibilized farmers, as well as those who work in dairy, fisheries, and the pastoralists, so that the farming community itself is a very broad range of people working in on livelihoods in the villages of India. So they have regular meetings and they discuss policies, and some of their members are taking up these issues with the people in the government. And I think it's a very important role which they are playing, and hopefully I hope a similar farmers' protest does not have to happen again. But if it does have to happen, I think these communities, these organizations will definitely help in the long run.
I would like to say that the structure of the system is like such that the education have to come. There will be more tested touch, and the role of organization is very, very important. I remember Tarkali speaking at Delhi, and he was asked a question about Occupy Wall Street movement. And there, when he replied about the failure of that movement and all that, he suddenly switched to Punjabi. And he said, Tanjeem da bhi koi role hota hai. The role of the organization. So the organizations always have a role. With this, I would request that you may like to ask some questions to Madam. I'll make some points or observations about it.
Thank you, Sir ji. And I think it is a great opportunity for all of us to come and listen to Namita's perspective on the farmers' protest. you have asked me to ask a question. I think where do I start is a bigger question for me. But I guess it was an iconic farmers' protest. It has, especially for Punjab, it has brought them into a realization that each one of us carry a power of a democratic right to ask question. I think that was the biggest message that came out from this protest. But there were certain other messages which I think should have also been seen in that light. One of them, I think, which you also discussed, that the farmer leaders were trying to fight for a cause. I think there is another school of thought that they were trying to stay along or stay together because of for their own survival. Because it was known that if they had at that time walked back to the villages or had a confrontation or a split or whatever you call it, as some farmer leader wrote in a newspaper that then they would have become a jinda lash in the village. That is how the constituency was so powerful at that particular time. So they made them, or they forced them to stay together. I think that's a very strong message that any future agitation that takes place in this country should realize that it can happen. That the pressure from the audience itself is so strong that the leaders have no escape but to stay together. I think that's a very powerful message given the kind of politics that operates today. Somebody fights on the election of party A and then switches on to party B 10 days later when he has to become a minister and so on and so forth, because there is no force of the constituency which makes him stay at that particular slot. He cannot go away from that. I think that was another very strong message emanating from this farmers' protest. But eventually, I think the focus or the main thing stays there, that MSP has to be legalized. That's what the farmers have demanded. And I hope sooner or later the governments will start to listen at it. But I think the bigger message that I would have loved to see emerging is that the people in the cities have a contempt for farmers. Whether farmer in Punjab or in Karnataka or whichever part of the country, people in cities have so much of contempt, I realize, that why the governments are not acting at about farmers' issues is because the people who are always talking about these kind of issues have no interest in agriculture. They still carry that idea that farmers are stinkingly rich and they are being pampered and so on. They have वो 2 लाख रुपए का म्यूजिक सिस्टम अपने ट्रैक्टर पे लगाते हैं. That kind of image. I'm very sad that people, and I think that is where the role of media also steps in. And in Punjab, I must say the media has done very well as far as agriculture protests are concerned, but in the rest of the country it has been disappointing. So I think in that connection, your book will come up as a savior at this particular time. We need to know the real story, we need to know what is happening in agriculture, and of course, as you rightly talk about from prior to Green Revolution to the present era, and also the future, I think speaks a lot, but my worry still stays that the people in the cities have failed the farmers. And why I'm saying so is only 2 days back I saw a Marathi podcast. Somebody, I don't know the name, he was saying that actually why I'm confronting you is because you are the failure. I like that. Somebody should stand up and say that you are the failure. He showed a small clip about 10 minutes of a farmer who grows onions, had a record harvest, goes to the mandi. Mandi, the price offered is 60 paisa, so it becomes 60 for 10 quintals. And then, the amount that the trader had to pay him, he said, actually you have to pay me 250 rupees more. So the farmer goes all the way to the mandi and there he sells his produce. He has to pay money from his pocket for bringing that produce to the mandi. It doesn't agitate us anymore. When the tomatoes are thrown on the streets, nobody in the cities is worried. But लेकिन टमाटर का 10 रुपए भाव हो जाए, 15 रुपए हो जाए, everybody is up in arms कि मेरा house का budget खराब हो गया है, and so on and so forth. This contempt against farming, I think, has to go. And I thought the farmers' movement would have been a great catalyst to do that, but somehow it has not happened. And I hope in the times to come, this also is one of the outcomes of the protests that began in 2020 and 21, and eventually, as Suraj Ji said, this expectation that these will not happen, he rightly said that this is structurally designed in a manner कि वो inequality या वो तो हमें face करना ही करना है, and that is again because the middle class is completely insensitive to these issues, and that's the biggest failure that this protest have shown, or protest has shown. How do we change it? I have no idea. Perhaps more writings from Pari would be very helpful in spreading the message and taking it forward. And also more, as you mentioned yourself, कि पंजाब में कविताओं का या इस तरह बहुत sensitivity है. And I think maybe that would help with Mr. Surajji ji, reading that entire group or plan. I think it's something that we look forward to. जितना आप लोगों के वो गीत, गाने, कविताएं, poems जो भी आएगा, I think that will be influential, changing the opinion or behavior. But otherwise, what the farmers did, they stood forward, they demonstrated, and they did. It's like in a relay race, they should have been a pattern that they pass on to the next people, in the race that you go completely your lap and then the second lap and so on. But here in this case, the middle class failed to take that baton in their hand and run forward. So that has been the biggest failure of the farmers' movement. But yes, it should be remembered, and I think history should recall and go back to that massive protest. And as you mentioned, I think Neeru mentioned that मेरे को दोबारा जिंदगी में ऐसा protest मिलने का मौका नहीं मिलेगा. I think all of us would agree कि जो उस protest में गए हैं, उनको ही ये feel हो पाया कि ये protest का मतलब क्या था. दोबारा शायद ये मौका ना मिले, लेकिन उसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि जो उनकी कोशिश थी या प्रयास था to sensitize the country at the crisis that was happening is essentially because Surajji ji, if you know me, इसलिए हुआ क्योंकि whether it was the media, whether it was the universities and the academicians, whether it was the leaders, whether it was the state assemblies or the parliament, all of them failed to stand for farmers or talk about farmers in a manner that the country required. वो जो failure हुआ है collective सभी का, that actually forced the farmers to come forward. उनको ये समझ आया कि कोई नहीं मेरे लिए लड़ेगा, मुझे ये लड़ाई खुद ही लड़नी पड़ेगी. So they came forward, fought that war or whatever you call it, and eventually they got the government on the back foot. So it was something which demonstrated that when people come together, they can change mountains or they can shift mountains. तो वो उन्होंने किया है. अब उसका आगे क्या निकला? I think time will only tell कि क्या होगा. But I think it will be very interesting अगर नमिता जी आप भी कभी इस पे सोचें कि next challenge should be to write about the post जो ये protest हुआ था, as to what it was expected या क्या हुआ क्या नहीं हुआ, blah blah blah, all those kind of things. I think should be another interesting topic. I hope with all your busy schedule or work schedule, given your responsibilities in Pari, I still feel that someday you will feel, or you will bring out a new book that will be helpful to open up our eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Devendra ji. I would very quickly only say that I think the intention of this book was to address the middle class and the urban elite who have largely ignored the farmers. And there are many who are actually genuinely interested, though their numbers may be small. And I am hoping that they will read the book for that reason. The specific chapter, Challenges of Agriculture, is actually aimed at such people who actually don't know anything about agriculture. And I've tried to explain all the different aspects of agriculture in as briefly and as simply as possible, so that should help. And I think the failure of the middle class is not actually the failure of farmers, the farmers' movement. It was the failure of our humanity, that we did not, understand, or we did not take up the cause of farmers the way we should have done, because finally it is we who are benefiting from farming. We are the ones who have to eat food which the farmers provide. And in the long run, if we don't support, then we are going to suffer. So I think I will end there.
Like Devendra Sharma said that the culture from the struggle, they often go together. We have in Punjab the experience of the Ekta movement, and I remember seeing the footage of Navalman, where the push against the Murtala and the simultaneous march of the culture, the drama spread, it depicted very beautifully. And before that, in fact, the formation of the Sans Sabha in Punjab, Sans Sabha in Punjab, and the Kirti Kisan Sabha, the role of culture was very, very important. The role of the drama spread and all that. Poets like Vijayanagara Singh Holt, which came before Kirta and all that. A group of poets who were associated with the newspaper Kirti, in fact. We will talk about them sometime. I would request Mr. Carroll's saying on sexism.
We have been discussing farmers' movement. I am a lawyer and a farmer. What I see is, first, the farmer is at the mercy of weather. The worst comes market. You cooperators invest heavily in it. When you go and sell it for 5 rupees or 6 rupees a kilogram, you may not be earning more than 50 paisa a kilo. But within 15 days, when the agriculture produce is sold by the farmer who can't withhold this, who can't preserve it, the prices come twice, 3 times, 4 times. In a month or so, doesn't take much time. I have been watching I'm quite old man, for 60, 70 years. The cooperative movement originated when I became a lawyer. And it has failed the farmer miserably. It has destroyed the farmer. Because illiterate people will be forced into holding office. And the government appointed Panchayat secretary. He would get their thumb marks on registers, put the loans on them, enjoy the money himself. I've seen a 38-year-old become a tenant and his secretary paid a pension off. Here is the failure of the local level politician when legislature has totally failed to legislate because they don't discuss. Once I was trying to calculate the time spent by parliament in abusing each other and the time spent on framing laws and the members taking part in that debate. I think emergency 76 was the far point from where debate totally disapproved. Debate is required to see how the laws made are implemented, what is their end result, how they are implemented. And that is where panchayats and cooperative societies only added to the load of loans on farmers, giving an easy loan than extracting. And this farmer movement, when it exists, the sale of land by cooperative side, the individual lenders, I see a ray of hope, but not much. It's only a light point at the end of the tunnel. What practically we have done in 7 decades to just see that the farmer gets its due in price. Just to reduce the gap in those 30 days. I don't see any small, mid-sized, small cold storages and villages. That is what was the job of the cooperative societies. They tried to give tractors to cooperative societies, which only the off-parent. And the real farmer at the end, for whom it was done, never gets it. So it's a total administrative and political failure on the part of society as a whole. Punjab Assembly session is there. It ends in 2 days. Working for only few hours. And the result is resolutions published, and that's all. Give free electricity to farmers. That destroyed ordinary farmers. Because the poor man with the diesel pump had to spend much more and get the same price as the farmer getting free electricity. And the farmer who used to keep awake at night to get his turn of canal water, they finished the water base and would put on the switch on the electric motor. Whenever electricity comes, starts working, whether the water is used or abused, and mostly abused. And this total concentration of fetching votes, and political parties or social activists fail to make people understand that it is their money which is being played on them. And getting power and misusing that power is the only end. So we need to form some associations which really educate the common man about what is the result of government policies. But I find in my long career that even press has done that. I don't find any stories published which highlight the plight of a man who is deprived by the system. In my younger days, there used to be some leftist movement students, call them comrades or anything. They have disappeared in late 60s. There's nothing left. And I would say at this age, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Nothing on it that goes where to. Like,
There are two more.
काफी डिटेल में बातचीत हुई। जिस रूप में जो फार्मर्स प्रोटेस्ट के बारे में जो किताब आई है, इसमें अच्छी बात यह है कि जो रेफरेंस टाइप बहुत चीज़ें पॉजिटिवली इनमें इनसाइड में दी गई है। दो पॉइंट जो मेरे मन में है, एक तो जो किसान मजदूर कमीशन है, मैं उसके साथ पहले दिन से जुड़ा हूँ, लगातार वर्क भी कर रहे हैं। बड़ी दो तीन चीज़ें बड़ी सीरियस प्रॉब्लमेटिक हैं। इंडिया जितना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है उसमें काफ़ी उन्होंने पी साइन और प्रोफेसर जगमोहन सिंह जो लोग काम कर रहे हैं। सबसे बड़ी हर्डल जो है, जो फार्मर्स प्रोटेस्ट मूवमेंट वाले लोग हैं जिन्होंने इतनी लड़ाई लड़ी जीती भी, लेकिन उनको बड़ी कोशिश की जाती है कि आप इकट्ठे बैठ के जो लैंड का क्वेश्चन है या फार्मर्स का क्वेश्चन है, फूड सिक्योरिटी का क्वेश्चन है, इसमें कलेक्टिवली वर्क करें। उसमें काफ़ी चीज़ किसान मजदूर कमीशन के सामने सबसे बड़ी हर्डल यह है जो ओवरकम नहीं। दूसरा कारण यह है कि अभी क्योंकि सारे कलेक्टिवली अभी जो स्वामीनाथन की वो रिपोर्ट थी, उसके बाद नए पैरामीटर बहुत चेंज हो गए। दूसरा क्वेश्चन ये है। और तीसरा, जिस तेजी से कारपोरेट प्लस राइटिज्म उनके यूनिट के कारण लैंड से बहुत पीजेंट्री को निकाला जा रहा है। थर्ड चैलेंज यह है। सो दीज आर द कंटेम्परेरी चैलेंजेस फार्मर्स मूवमेंट में के लिए भी है, पीजेंट्स के लिए है। जो जिन पीजेंट्स को उखाड़ा जा रहा है आने वाले समय के, इसकी टर्म को और भी काटा जाएगा। इस चैलेंज को भी अभी हमें सीरियसली उनसे एंगेज करना चाहिए।
मेरा छोटा सा सवाल है, आप जब पहले देखते हैं तो काफी कैची हेडिंग है और लगता है कि जैसे जैसे जो डेली प्रोटेस्ट था उसके बारे में है। मैंने जो बैठे बैठे किताब देखी तो उसमें बहुत बढ़िया काम किया गया है। मतलब वो होता वो भी अच्छे होता, पर इसमें हिस्टोरिकल पर्सपेक्टिव से काफी इशू आपने कवर किए हैं और खेती को क्या क्या प्रॉब्लम आ रही है एग्रीकल्चर में, ऑर्गेनिक की तरफ जाने की काफी अच्छा है। पर क्योंकि मैं कई पे आता हूँ, आपने टाइटल के बारे में बात भी की थी फार्मर के बारे में। अगर आपने जो फोटो इसी प्रोटेस्ट से चूज करनी थी आपने और पब्लिशर ने, तो मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है कि ये जो आंदोलन शुरू हुआ था, पंजाब से शुरू हुआ, प्रोग्रेस फार्मर यूनियन जो है वो सबसे आगे थी, तो उसका जो भी अब तक वेस्टर्न प्रेस में जो डॉक्यूमेंट्री में जो आता है तो पंजाब के किसान को, हालांकि नेशनल अपना आंदोलन बना बहुत अच्छा हुआ, पर फिर भी पंजाब का तो फेस था, पंजाब का फार्मर रहा है। तो जब आपने टाइटल चूज किया तो पंजाब का फार्मर को आई थिंक बिल्कुल इग्नोर किया गया है। अगर तो रेड शर्ट को ही हाईलाइट करना था देन दैट इज डिफरेंट। अदरवाइज मैं एज ए रीडर एज ए जर्नलिस्ट मेरे को लगता है, हो सकता मैं ठीक ना हूँ, कि पंजाब इसकी अच्छा होता कि अगर इसकी फोटो में पंजाब का किसान भी दर्ज।
एक्चुअली ये फोटो जो पूरी फोटो है उसमें पंजाब के किसान भी हैं। हाँ, वो पूरा जो फोटो है उसमें है पंजाब के किसान, लेकिन महिला किसान का थोड़ा फोकस भी है और आगे की सोच के महिला किसान पे फोकस होना चाहिए, उसके लिए ये फोटो चूज किया गया। बुक के अंदर तो पंजाब का जो रोल है वो उसको काफी अहमियत दी गई है और सिखिज्म का भी जो इन्फ्लुएंस है उसके बारे में भी लिखा हुआ है। एक चीज मैं कहना चाहूंगी कि जैसे पहले भी बताया कि ये बुक इसलिए लिखी गई है कि पहले तो मुझे खुद को ये पूरा समझना पड़ा कि खेती में क्या क्या इन्वॉल्व है, क्या क्या चैलेंजेस है, किसानों को क्या दिक्कतें हैं, प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, और मुझे समझ पाए और वो मैं बाकी मेरे जैसे लोगों को एक्सप्लेन कर पाऊँ। सो दैट वाज द मेन इंटेंशन ऑफ दिस बुक। और मैं ये सोचती हूँ कि शायद बाकी जो शहरों में रहते हैं जिनको किसानी के बारे में कुछ पता नहीं, वो अगर ये पढ़ेंगे तो उनको थोड़ा एम्पैथी, थोड़ा उनकी समझ थोड़ी बढ़ेगी किसानी के बारे में और किसानों के बारे में थोड़ा और इंटरेस्ट लेंगे वो, और शायद आगे जाके वो इन मूवमेंट्स में ज्यादा इन्वॉल्व होंगे और ज्यादा किसानों के बारे में सोचेंगे।
थैंक यू। बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग जो है हमारी जो डिस्कशन चली, और इसमें जो वीरेंद्र शर्मा जी ने कहा दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, द प्रेशर फ्रॉम लोग, बिकॉज many decisions, many vital decisions in this movement, they were taken on the roads, like staying on Singhu border, the most vital decision was taken on the road by the pressure of the masses participating. Similarly, what happened on 26 January in Haryana and the role of the Haryana farmers organization breaking of the barricades, because the Punjab organizations were almost prepared, had thought that they will be stopped at the border and all that. That decision also to break the barricade and all that, it came from Haryana, and it was infectious in Punjab, and whole Punjab, it was looking like that it was going to Singhu border and all that. and the question of middle classes, the role about the perception of farmers. It reminds me of Karl Marx's writing at one place where he says that the most, I don't really like the exact words, that the damage to the working classes in Europe has been done by the middle classes who hate the working classes, who hate the work being done by hand and all that. And also the market, as we know, the old Teresa mentioned, Karl Marx compared it to vampire at a number of places. A blood-sucking vampire which sucks the blood of neighbors. And the more blood it sucks, more hungry it becomes. So, if there are no more questions, if any important, anybody wants to say something? Monday?
सर मेरे को ये लगता है कि जैसे मैंने भी थोड़ा आपने देखा है थोड़ा जैसे फार्मर कमीशन नेशन फॉर फार्मर मैंने सारी मीटिंग अटेंड की मतलब उनका रोल भी देखा तो मतलब थोड़ा लग रहा है कि मुझे ज्यादा हाइट है कि मैंने देखा उसमें रिटायर्ड लोग प्रोफेसर लोग पत्रकार बहुत सारे इकट्ठा हुए लेकिन 2020-21 के आंदोलन में भी और उससे पहले लॉन्ग मार्च में जो एक कह लो कि कल्चरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस या सिख ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस कह लो या गांव में जो यूथ क्लब वगैरह थे मालवे में मालवा यूथ क्लब इस टाइप के उन्होंने जो काम किया उसके पैरेलल में जो शहरी पेटी बोर्जुआ की ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस थी ये कहीं भी खड़ा नहीं होती है मतलब इनका माउथ पब्लिसिटी बहुत कर रहे हैं मतलब लिख के भी और वैसे भी सेम विद दीज की जो पत्रकारिता भी हुई उसमें मैंने नाम देखे पारी स्क्रोल द वायर न्यूज क्लिक मैं भी उनके लिए लिखता हूँ लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि जो पंजाब और हरियाणा के जो रूरल बैकग्राउंड से जो लड़के थे जिन्होंने पंजाबी में हिंदी में जो पत्रकारिता की और 24 घंटे वहां रह की थी उनका ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट था ये न्यूज क्लिप और ये सब तो बेचारे बहुत उसमें काम कर रहे हैं लिमिटेड उसमें और वो समझना वो थोड़ा सा लिमिटेड मेरे को लगता है कि ये दो थोड़ी ओवर हाइप या फिर एक लोग की सेल्फ पब्लिसिटी जैसा मुझे लगा ये थोड़ा सा मुझे लगा मतलब अगर स्वराजवीर उस टाइम पे ट्रिब्यून का एडिटर थे तो अगर स्वराजवीर उस टाइम पे कहते कि किसान आंदोलन में कि ट्रिब्यून बहुत आकड़ काम कर रहा है तो थोड़ा अजीब लगता लेकिन हम लोगों ने कहा कि ट्रिब्यून बेसिकली खेतीबाड़ी ट्रिब्यून बन गया है मतलब हम लोगों ने तारीफ एक तो वो ज्यादा मेरे को लगता है कि आपके काम की कोई दूसरा तारीफ करे वो ठीक है अपने काम की खुद ही तारीफ करके और कह दे कि हम तो बहुत कुछ उस आइडिया में जिए कि हम तो बहुत अच्छा काम कर रहे हो मुझे थोड़ा अजीब लगा मतलब मैं खासकर फार्मर कमीशन और वो नेशन फॉर फार्मर और ये सारा
I think there are many stories to be told, and Mandeep has also written about the actual experience and a kind of perspective from his own side, and the real and the rustic and the rugged experience he has written a book. It needs to be discussed, and we need to expand on these things. And he has rightly said the role of the many other organizations, small groups, the Malwa or Maja or we are from our area, I know, one of the main organizations could not come into the mainstream and all that. There are many problems of the district, but at this moment, we would like to complete this session. As this was the education of not only for farmers, but also of the right of the people to protest. When it was being seen that perhaps to protest is becoming impossible, then the Shaheen Bagh movement and the farmer movement, they came as a kind of ray of hope, and that's what now University had said about that time. And that was summed up by our poet. Again, I will come back to Sanjeev Patwari, who said, "ये बात मेरी कहनी है, ये बात सिर्फ ना है मसला सिर्फ किसान का है, ये पिंड दे बसते रहता है, ये गांव जिन्हों तो ना कुछ जानना है, जिसको describe जिसको reference to the vast sheet of the ਇਹ ਬਾਤ ਮੇਰੀ ਇੰਨੀ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਨਾ ਇਹ ਮਸਲਾ ਸਿਰਫ ਕਿਸਾਨ ਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਪਿੰਡ ਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਰਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਲੋਕ ਦਾ ਉੱਚੇ ਜਾਣ ਦਾ ਹੈ। And but a very beautiful picture who were on the side of the establishment and who were on the side of farmers on our side, and he had written, तेरे नाल अमीर वजीर खड़े, तेरे नाल अमीर वजीर खड़े, मेरे नाल पैगंबर पीर खड़े, रविदास फरीद कबीर खड़े, मेरे नानक शाह फकीर खड़े, मेरा नामदेव मेरा तन्नाम, मैनू मान अपनी इस शान दा है, ये बात नहीं कहनी। And I would also like to say that India or Punjab or Haryana, they are not within their boundaries. We cut across the boundaries. Like Maharashtra, we have very important many linkages, but I will mention only two. One of Baba Namdev, who came here and lived here for many years at a place called Kuman in village Gurdaspur, from where I come, and I got my primary and higher education in that village, and the village of Baba Namdev, and of Vishnu Ganesh Pingli, who was hanged to death along with the first batch of the guides, about which Professor Harish had done the seminal work and written very extensively. And in the end, I would like to pay my own tribute to the farmers who, as Namita ji said, taught us the value and importance of democracy. But before that, I would like to say that we as the lead Sani had said, the reflection of farmer movements, including our great Mujara movement, it's there, and the reflection of the Champaran Million struggle led by Mahatma Gandhi. All those moments in there, and the words of Mahatma Gandhi. She quotes, they ring very loudly. Mahatma Gandhi wrote, according to law, I was on trial. But truly speaking, government was to be on trial. And I would say that this was the truth of the farmers' movement also. The farmers were arrested, they died there, more than 600 lives were lost, and it would have been the other side on one trial rather than ask them questions from the farmers or farmers organization. And my own tribute, because Namita ji said that these protests taught us the value and importance of democracy and dissent. Through the peaceful protest that lasted over a year and continued this. I salute to those who chose to dissent, to wage the struggle, salute to the unity, and I had modified one of my old poems. There will be one part of it. I will recite about that. What they did, उन्होंने की किया? उन्हें बन लिया कफन पानियां का. उन्हें बन लिया कफन पानियां का. मिट्टी अपनी समय या खड़े हुए लीरो लीर चके. पग्गा पाटियां समय. नगीने पंजाबाजी के जड़े हुए. या चुलियां तो सेक ते तासा. तूफान संसां ते चढ़े हुए ओ अग दे हरफां दा हल्फ है. ओ अग दे हरफां दा हल्फ है ते इबारत खेतां की पढ़े हुए. Namita ji, for you, I will translate into English. They tied the death turban of water and stood before Mother Earth. Their clothes were and turbans were in tatters. But in turbans glittered the bulge of spirit of self-sacrifice. They took the warmth and heat from the hearts, and their breaths were engulfed in storm. They were the trust of the world of fire, and they knew the language of fields. Salute to them, and with this, I will ask Ashmi to make more announcements.
Namita wants to.
Yeah, it's an excellent poem. Thank you so much for citing it. I want to thank everyone for listening so carefully, Devi and also everyone here who spoke and gave their comments and questions as well as criticisms.